They warned me never to wander too deep into the forest. The villagers spoke of shadows that moved without wind, of whispers that circled you like wolves, of a woman older than time itself who waited in the dark. At first, I laughed it off. Folklore, I thought. Old stories meant to scare children and keep them from straying too far. But sometimes a story clings to you like a burr. You can shake it off, but it never leaves your mind completely. That's how I found myself one cold, moonlit night, stepping beyond the safety of the village lamps and into the woods. I wasn't seeking trouble, not exactly. I was chasing curiosity, that dangerous spark that pushes you one step further even when your instincts beg you to turn back. The deeper I went, the more the world seemed to fold in on itself. The trees grew closer together, their branches tangling like twisted hands. The air smelled of damp earth, smoke, and something faintly metallic like blood or rust. Every sound, every snap of a twig underfoot, every rustle of unseen movement echoed loud in the silence. And then came the whispers. At first, they were soft, almost indistinguishable from the wind. But the further I walked, the clearer they became. Voices layered upon one another, murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. Some were harsh, like cracking wood. Others were delicate, like leaves brushing together. Yet all of them carried one name, over and over, Baba Yaga. My chest tightened. I should have turned back. I should have listened to the stories, to the warnings, but by then my feet were no longer my own. It was as if the forest itself had taken hold of me, pulling me deeper into its heart. And then I saw it. Through the trees, in a small clearing bathed in pale moonlight, stood a house. Not a normal house, but one that towered above the earth, perched on enormous, spindly legs. Chicken legs, they shifted and scratched at the ground as though impatient, restless. The house swayed with a slow, unnatural rhythm, like it was breathing. Every hair on my body stood on end. My mouth went dry. This was no children's tale. No fireside warning. I was staring at the impossible. And that was when the front door creaked open. The deeper I went, the less the forest felt like a place of nature and more like a living creature itself. Branches didn't just sway in the wind. They leaned closer as though they were listening. Every step I took, the crunch of leaves seemed too loud, as if announcing my presence to something watching. At one point, I swore I heard laughter, not joyous, human laughter, but a broken, hollow cackle that cracked through the trees. My stomach tightened, and I spun around, but there was nothing. Only shadows that seemed to stretch and curl where they shouldn't. The path, if I could even call it that, grew narrower. The trees pressed in, their trunks dark as charred bone. And then I saw them, strange markings carved into the bark. Circles, runes, and crooked shapes that almost writhed when my eyes lingered too long. Some of them looked fresh, the wood still pale and raw beneath the surface, as if something had clawed them into place only hours ago. A cold wind slid between the trees, and with it came a smell. Not the scent of soil or damp moss, this was different. A sickly mixture of burning herbs and something foul, like rotting meat left out too long. My hand trembled as I pulled my jacket tighter around me, but I couldn't stop moving forward. Something about those carvings pulled me deeper, like they weren't just decorations but signs meant to guide or trap. It was then that I noticed something on the ground. A trail, small bones, scattered like breadcrumbs. Tiny vertebrae, bird skulls, the hollow remains of creatures I couldn't name. They crunched under my boots, snapping like brittle twigs. And for the first time since entering the forest, I felt something shift. The silence wasn't just silence anymore, it was expectation. And then I heard it again, that laugh, closer this time. A sound like firewood snapping in the hearth, jagged and sharp, echoing low and long until it blended with the wind. My mouth went dry. I should have turned back. Any sane person would have. But there was no path behind me anymore. I looked over my shoulder, and the way I had come was gone, swallowed by black trunks and tangled branches. The forest had closed itself, and I was no longer a guest. I was prey. The forest no longer felt like a place of trees and roots. It was a labyrinth designed to keep me moving deeper into its heart. The air pressed heavy on my chest, damp and sour, as though I were breathing through layers of old cloth. And then I heard it. Not laughter this time, a whisper. It slithered between the branches, curling around my ears like smoke. I couldn't make out the words at first, but they were their rasping syllables that seemed older than the trees themselves. Every hair on my arms stood on end. I froze, straining to listen. Turn back, or stay forever. The voice was thin, broken, like it belonged to something that had forgotten how to sound human. I spun, searching the shadows, but there was no one, nothing, only those cursed carvings on the bark, pulsing with faint light as if the runes themselves were breathing. My hands shook, but my legs kept moving. I wasn't choosing to walk anymore. The path, if it even existed, was pulling me forward, the earth itself tilting beneath my boots. That's when I saw it. Through the thick veil of trees, a shape loomed. At first, it looked like a crooked tower, hunched and broken. But the closer I got, the more it twisted into something impossible, a house. It stood on enormous legs, gnarled, scaled, and clawed like the limbs of a monstrous bird. They shifted in the soil, restless, scraping the earth. The house swayed slightly as if it were alive, listening to me approach. A lantern swung on the crooked doorframe, glowing faintly green. And in its sickly light, I could see them bundles of bones tied with string, hanging like decorations. Skulls of foxes, deer, and worse, something disturbingly human. The whispers grew louder now, circling me, weaving in and out of my thoughts until they were no longer outside, but inside my skull. She waits for you? My pulse hammered, my mouth tasted of iron, and still I couldn't stop. My feet dragged me closer to the thing. Then came the creak. The door of the hut groaned open by itself, spilling a warm, golden glow into the darkness. For a fleeting second, it almost looked inviting, like a home, like safety. But I knew better. Something inside was waiting. And it knew my name. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air shifted. The warmth inside the hut felt wrong, thick and sticky, like honey that had been left to rot. Shadows bent strangely against the walls, stretching longer than they should, curling like fingers. And then she stepped into view. Her body was twisted, hunched but towering, as if her spine had broken and reformed in some grotesque shape. A ragged shawl clung to her shoulders, stitched from scraps of fabric that looked suspiciously like skin. Her hair spilled down in tangled ropes, gray and black, hiding most of her face. But her eyes, those I saw clear as fire. They burned yellow, glowing from the dark like twin lanterns. "Ah," she rasped, her voice like tree bark tearing apart. "I've been waiting, far too long." Her bony fingers dragged across the wall as she moved closer, nails scratching grooves into the wood. Behind her, the hut creaked on its giant legs, shifting as though it breathed with her every step. My mouth was dry, but words tumbled out anyway. Who are you?" The witch's grin widened, showing teeth sharp and brown as rotting wood. "Names are nothing," she hissed, "but you know me. They all do." She tilted her head, and the bones hanging from her ceiling rattled as if stirred by an unseen hand. "Baba Yaga?" The name hit me like a blow. My chest tightened, my heart stuttered. Every legend I had heard, every story whispered to frighten children, it was all real, standing just inches away. She circled me slowly, her steps making no sound, her gaze never leaving my face. The smell of ash and wet soil clung to her, thick enough to choke on. "You've walked too far into my forest," she crooned, "and now you belong to me." Her hand, long and skeletal, lifted toward my cheek. I flinched back, but the door slammed shut behind me on its own, the light outside vanishing in an instant. There was no escape. Only her. The hut groaned, its long legs shifting beneath the floorboards as if ready to carry me far from the world I knew. Shadows curled tighter around me, suffocating the room in a darkness that pulsed with her every breath. Baba Yaga loomed close, her glowing eyes slicing through the gloom. "You've stepped willingly into my home," she whispered, her voice like a storm hidden in the trees. "And every guest must pay their price." I tried to steady my breath. "What do you want from me?" Her grin widened, cruel and knowing. "Not much. A story. A truth you've never spoken aloud, or—" She paused, and the air chilled. "Your bones to hang among mine." The ceiling rattled with skeletal remains swaying like morbid chimes. My stomach turned. I knew what she meant. This was no idle threat. Summoning every scrap of courage, I spoke. I told her of the fear that drove me, of the hunger to find answers in the dark places of the world. Words poured from me like blood from a wound, raw and desperate. For a moment, silence. Then Baba Yaga laughed. The sound was jagged, splitting the air. "Ah, so the wanderer craves truth above life itself. How delightful." She leaned so close I felt the brush of her icy breath on my ear. "Then truth you shall have." The walls of the hut trembled. Images clawed at the edges of my vision, faces, forests, beasts I had never seen yet somehow recognized. 100 tales, 1,000 shadows, all pressing in at once. My mind screamed, but my body could not move. And then, as suddenly as it began, the visions ended. Baba Yaga stepped back, her grin fading into something unreadable. "You've been marked, wanderer. The forest knows you now. Wherever you go, it will whisper your name." The door creaked open behind me, pale light spilled in, cold and distant. I stumbled backward out into the snow, my heart pounding in my chest. When I turned, the hut was gone, only the silent trees remained. But even now, I hear her words in my head. "The forest knows you." And I can't help but wonder, did I escape her hut? Or did I simply carry it with me? If you were in my place, would you dare to enter Baba Yaga's hut? Or would you run before the door creaked open? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe because more legends are waiting and the forest is far from silent.